My name is Hannah Whitmore. I am 31 years old and at 2 a.m. I lay sprawled on the hardwood floor, my legs snapped at an angle no human body should ever bend, while my stepfather's fists still hovered above me and my mother just watched. If you're watching this, drop a comment, hit like and subscribe, because what I'm about to confess isn't just my story, it's a warning about the kind of betrayal that cuts deeper than any wound on the skin. The smell of whiskey burned my nose before his knuckles ever touched me. Richard, my stepdad, had been drinking since sundown. His eyes, bloodshot and mean, locked on me like I was prey trespassing in his territory. And Mom? She sat curled in her robe, arms crossed, face twisted with something colder than anger. Contempt. I remember clawing at the floorboards as his boot connected with my side. The sound of the clock on the wall ticking past 2:03 felt like mockery. I thought Mom would intervene. But she leaned back, sneered, and hissed the words that froze me. You should have signed the loan. I wasn't just bleeding on the floor. I was bleeding out the last of my illusions that family means protection. When I was a kid, Mom used to braid my hair before school. She'd hum Patsy Cline under her breath, her fingers tugging too tight, but I loved it. I'd glance at her in the mirror and think, she's my anchor. Now 31 years old, that same woman was the one letting me drown. Richard's fist came down again. My lips split. The copper taste filled my mouth. I gasped, choking, and for one insane second I thought about how much I wanted a glass of water. Just water. Isn't it strange what the body begs for when you're close to blacking out? By the time he staggered back, muttering curses, I was crawling toward Mom. Each drag of my body across the floor sent shocks through my shattered leg. My hands shook as I reached for her. For mercy. For anything. She didn't move. Didn't flinch. Just stared down at me with those tired green eyes, like I was an inconvenience. Like I was the one who had broken her heart. When my fingers brushed her slipper, she bent low, and instead of comfort, I felt her breath hot against my ear. What she whispered next made my soul leave my body. Her whisper was razor thin, but it cut through the haze of blood and pain. You've always been a disappointment, Hannah. I froze. My arms gave out beneath me and my cheek pressed against the cold hardwood floor. Her words hurt more than the broken leg, more than the bruises already blooming across my ribs. I knew that somewhere deep down she still loved me. But in that moment I realized she had chosen him over me. The air smelled of sour liquor and burnt coffee grounds from the kitchen counter. The house was silent except for Richard's wheeze and the slow tick of the living room clock. My blood pooled under me, warm against the icy boards, and the sound of it dripping felt louder than thunder. I wanted to scream, but my throat locked. Instead, my mind dragged me backward, years earlier, when I was 10 and came home with a scraped knee. Mom had rushed for the peroxide, scolding me gently about climbing trees in flip-flops. Her hands were tender then, wiping away dirt, blowing on the sting. You're my tough girl, she'd whispered that day. Now, those same hands were folded across her chest as if sealing her heart shut. Richard slumped onto the couch, muttering about ungrateful brats and debts unpaid. He lit a cigarette, the acrid smoke drifting into my lungs, making me cough until blood flecked my lips. Look at you, Mom said, almost bored. 31 years old, still nothing to show. No husband, no kids, no money. You think anyone's coming to save you? I clawed at the rug beneath me, my nails tearing fibers loose. I wanted to shout, I saved myself 100 times from the mess you left me in, but all that came out was a broken whimper. She leaned closer. Sign the papers for Richard. That's the only way this ends. For a second I thought I might pass out. But the rage that coiled in my chest burned hotter than the pain. I realized this wasn't just a drunken outburst. It was a plan. They wanted me broken. They wanted me desperate enough to give in. But I wasn't going to. Somewhere inside me, buried under the terror, a voice whispered, "This is the night everything changes." I lay there, forcing air into my lungs, every breath jagged. And as I stared at the ceiling fan turning lazily above us, a thought crystallized. They had underestimated me. Because they didn't know yet what I was capable of when the people I trusted most decided to leave me for dead. And what I did next would leave them both wishing they had. The next minutes blurred together, pain clouding my vision, but I remember the details too sharply to ever forget. The hum of that ceiling fan, the reek of whiskey on Richard's breath, the way Mom's robe sash dragged across the floor as she stepped over me like I was roadkill. I dragged myself to the wall, propping my body against it, my broken legs screaming with every movement. My breath came in shallow, ragged pulls. I needed to stay awake. If I blacked out, I wasn't sure I'd ever open my eyes again. My mind slipped to another memory. Christmas morning when I was 16. Mom promised me a guitar if I passed all my exams. I studied until my eyes bled, scored straight A's. That morning she handed me a thrift store sweater and said, "Life's about compromises." Richard got a brand new leather jacket instead. He wasn't even my father. But he had already replaced me. Now here we were again, me shoved into the shadows, him rewarded with her loyalty. Richard groaned and pushed himself off the couch. He loomed over me, his boots heavy on the floor. "She'll sign," he muttered, blowing smoke into my face. "One way or another." He reached for my arm, his grip like iron. I yanked back instinctively, a cry tearing from my throat. Pain shot through my ribs, but I bit it down, refusing to give him the satisfaction. "Pathetic," he spat, shoving me so hard my head cracked against the wall. Mom didn't flinch. Didn't move. Just sipped her cold coffee and stared like she was watching a rerun of her favorite show. Inside me something shifted. Grief collapsed into fury, white-hot and unrelenting. I realized there would be no rescue. No miracle. No apology whispered in the dark. If I wanted this to end, I'd have to end it myself. I scanned the room through blurred eyes, searching for anything I could use. The iron poker leaned by the fireplace. The cordless phone on the counter. Even shards of glass from a picture frame Richard had smashed weeks earlier still glittered faintly near the trash can. Options. Weapons. Escape routes. My brain, half-conscious, was already cataloging them all. "Go ahead, beg her again," Richard sneered. "Maybe she'll pat your head like when you were a brat." His laughter echoed, low and jagged. My mother's lips twitched, almost amused. And that was when I swore silently that tonight wouldn't end the way they thought it would. What neither of them knew, what they couldn't see through my blood-soaked face, was that I had already started planning. And the plan would turn their cruelty into the very weapon that destroyed them. Richard lumbered back toward the couch, his heavy frame sinking into the cushions with a grunt. He stubbed his cigarette out in Mom's favorite porcelain dish, the one she used to tell me never to touch as a child. Watching her say nothing, watching her accept his every violation, was the clearest proof that whatever love she once had for me was gone. I pressed my back harder against the wall, forcing my body upright despite the screaming in my leg. My vision blurred, but adrenaline kept me awake. The copper tang of blood mixed with the bitter smoke in the air until every breath seared my lungs. That was when a plan began to take shape. Not survival, revenge. I couldn't just escape them. I had to dismantle them the way they had dismantled me. Images flickered through my mind of the paperwork Mom kept hidden in her bedroom dresser. Documents Richard had been obsessed with lately. Loan papers. Forged signatures. Fraud waiting to collapse under the right spotlight. I'd caught glimpses once when I'd been home for Thanksgiving. I hadn't understood then, but now it fit. If I could survive tonight, I wouldn't just walk away. I'd take their empire of lies with me. "Look at her," Richard sneered, exhaling smoke. "She thinks she's still worth something." Mom's laugh was low, cruel. "She'll break soon. They all break." They thought I was weak, fragile. But what they didn't know was that years of being treated like the family's scapegoat had forged me into steel. Every humiliation, every insult had layered inside me until I was unrecognizable to myself. And now they'd handed me the fire I needed to burn their world down. My leg throbbed so violently I nearly passed out again. I bit down hard on my tongue until I tasted blood just to stay conscious. My eyes darted to the fireplace poker again. Heavy. Sharp at the tip. Within reach, if I could crawl a few more inches. I shifted slowly, inch by inch, praying the creak of the floorboards wouldn't betray me. Richard's drunken chuckle filled the silence. Mom sipped her coffee. Neither noticed. My fingers brushed the iron handle, slick with soot. My pulse roared in my ears as I wrapped my hand around it. That was when Mom's gaze snapped to me. Her eyes narrowed, not with concern, but with suspicion. "Hannah," she said slowly, voice dripping with venom, "what do you think you're doing?" The poker's weight anchored my trembling hand, soot smearing across my fingers. My body screamed for mercy, but my mind sharpened. I lifted my chin and met Mom's glare. What do you think you're doing? She repeated, her voice laced with mockery. Saving myself, I rasped, blood thick in my throat. Richard barked out a laugh, slapping his thigh. You, with that twig arm? Put it down before you embarrass yourself. He rose from the couch, each step deliberate, meant to intimidate. His shadow fell over me, towering like a monster from the childhood closet I'd never truly grown out of. My pulse thundered, but I didn't lower the weapon. Behind him, Mom's lips curved, not in fear but amusement. She wanted to see me humiliated one last time. But she was about to learn that I was done playing their victim. A flash from the past ripped through me, 12 years old, standing in the school gymnasium. I'd just won the science fair, clutching my ribbon with pride. Mom hadn't shown up. Later that night she shrugged, saying, "No one cares about those things, Hannah. You're wasting your time." I'd swallowed my hurt back then. Let it rot inside me. Not anymore. Richard lunged. Instinct took over. I swung. The poker connected with his arm, the crack echoing through the room like a gunshot. He roared, staggering back, shock and fury flashing across his face. For the first time all night he looked uncertain. And for the first time in my life I felt powerful. Mom shot to her feet, coffee spilling across the rug. "Enough!" she screamed, her mask cracking. "Drop it, Hannah." But I didn't. My hands shook, my lungs burned, yet something inside me had snapped free. This wasn't just defense, it was defiance. I tightened my grip on the poker, eyes never leaving hers. "You should have protected me," I whispered, my voice steadier than I expected. "But you made your choice." Her mouth opened, but no words came. Just silence. And in that silence I realized the balance of power had shifted. Richard clutched his arm, cursing under his breath. He wasn't invincible. He wasn't untouchable. He was just a drunk, pathetic man who had mistaken my endurance for weakness. Mom's green eyes flickered, the first spark of fear breaking through her disdain. I almost smiled. Because for the first time, they were the ones unsure of what came next. Richard staggered back toward the couch, cradling his arm. His bravado slipped like a mask in the rain. He was still dangerous, but no longer untouchable. I tasted iron as I spat blood onto the rug, never lowering the poker. Mom's face hardened, that thin-lipped sneer she wore whenever she wanted to remind me that she had control. But there was something else in her eyes now. Something new. Doubt. "You think you've won," she hissed. "You're nothing without us. Nothing." I almost laughed. Because right then, bleeding on the floor with my leg shattered, I realized how wrong she was. I was already nothing in their eyes. And if I was nothing, then I had nothing to lose. And people with nothing to lose are the most dangerous of all. The room tilted, but my mind sharpened. I saw the path clearer than ever. Escape tonight, gather evidence tomorrow, and make sure their lies collapsed around them. Those loan papers, their fraudulent signatures, they would be my weapon. I wasn't just going to survive this. I was going to drag them into the light, where every secret they'd hidden would burn. Richard growled from the couch. "She'll fold. They always fold." He tried to stand, but his injured arm gave way and he collapsed back with a howl. For the first time Mom flinched, not at me but at him. Her loyalty wavered just a fraction and I caught it. The first fracture in their unholy alliance. "Sign it," she ordered me sharply, her voice rising, frantic now. "Sign the papers, Hannah. Or you'll regret this more than you already do." I tightened my grip on the poker and forced a laugh through the blood and pain. "Regret," I whispered. "You haven't seen regret yet." It was then I heard it, the faintest sound beyond the front door. Tires crunching gravel. A car pulling into the driveway. All three of us froze. Richard's head snapped toward the window. Mom paled, her hand flying to her robe's sash. I didn't know who it was, but I knew one thing. This was my chance. My one sliver of salvation or destruction. Because whoever walked through that door next would decide whether I lived. Or whether I burned with them. Headlights cut through the blinds, streaks of pale light spilling across the living room. Richard cursed under his breath, struggling to rise despite his injury. Mom paced like a caged animal, her robe swishing with every step. I gripped the poker tighter, my pulse thundering. The sound of a car door slamming outside echoed like a gunshot. Whoever it was, they were walking into a nightmare. "Sit still," Richard barked at me, his voice trembling with the edge of panic. His authority was crumbling and he knew it. Mom rushed to him, whispering harshly. If she talks, we're finished. Do you understand? Finished. Finished. The words sang through me like a promise. They were afraid. Finally. Footsteps crunched on the gravel, approaching fast. My breath caught when I recognized the sound of the latch lifting. The door opened. And in walked my younger brother, Michael. For a second the world stopped. His uniform, blue polo from the night shift at the gas station, was stained with motor oil. His brown hair was damp from rain, his eyes heavy with exhaustion. But when he saw me on the floor, bloodied and broken, his expression snapped into shock. Hannah. His voice cracked. Richard moved first. It's not what it looks like, he growled, clutching his arm. Your sister, she. Shut up, Michael snapped, his jaw tightening. I'd never heard him use that tone, not even as a teenager. He dropped his keys, kneeling beside me. What the hell happened? Tears blurred my vision, but I managed to choke out. They let it happen. They wanted me to sign the papers. His head whipped toward Mom. Papers? What papers? Her face twitched, guilt flashing before the mask returned. Michael, she's exaggerating. You know how dramatic she gets. But the poker in my hand told a different story. So did the bruises already darkening my skin. Michael's eyes hardened. He wasn't a boy anymore. He wasn't naive. He was seeing the truth for the first time. And I realized something then, something that made my heart ache. Michael had always been the one good piece of this rotten family. Overlooked, underestimated, but never cruel. Now standing in that doorway, he was my lifeline. But whether he would fight for me or crumble under Mom's poison was the test that would change everything. Because if he chose wrong, I was ready to take them all down myself. Michael's fists clenched at his sides, his jaw flexing as he scanned the scene. My broken body, Richard nursing his arm, Mom standing rigid with that icy glare. What did you do to her? His voice thundered, shaking the walls. She brought it on herself, Mom snapped, her mask of control splintering. All she had to do was sign. You don't understand what's at stake. Don't, Michael cut her off. His voice was steel. Don't you dare justify this. I tried to push myself up, but my body screamed. Michael steadied me, his hands gentle, grounding me. For the first time all night, I felt something I thought I'd lost forever. Safety. You're coming with me, he said firmly. Richard rose, staggering, his voice venomous. She's not leaving this house. But Michael squared his shoulders, standing taller than I'd ever seen him. Try me. For the first time, Richard hesitated. His swagger collapsed under Michael's fury. He sank back onto the couch, muttering curses into his cigarette-stained hands. Mom's eyes, though, they burned into me. If you walk out that door, Hannah, she said, her voice shaking with fury, you'll regret it. Everything we built will collapse. I stared back at her, blood still dripping from my lip, my leg twisted. And I realized her threat was her confession. Everything they built was already rotting. And I was about to finish the demolition. Michael helped me to the car. Each step was agony, but every breath outside that house felt like freedom. Rain fell in cool sheets, washing blood from my face. As we drove away, I pressed my head against the window and whispered to myself, this isn't over. Because the next day I called a lawyer. I told them everything. About the forged signatures, the fraudulent loans, the bruises. About my mother's betrayal. By the end of the week, subpoenas were flying. By the end of the month, Richard was under investigation. And by the end of the year, both of them had nothing left but the ashes of their lies. Some nights I still hear her voice, her whisper in my ear, you've always been a disappointment. But then I remember how it ended. How her empire crumbled. How her silence in court screamed louder than any apology she never gave. And I remember what I whispered back the last time I saw her. You taught me how to survive. Because survival wasn't the revenge. The revenge was living better. The revenge was freedom. The revenge was mine. The weeks after leaving that house felt like walking on broken glass. My body healed slowly, casts, stitches, painkillers that dulled more than just the ache in my bones. But the deeper wounds, the ones my mother carved into me with her silence, took longer to face. Nights blurred into endless questions. How could a mother choose hatred over love? How do you forgive someone who never wanted you whole? Therapy became my anchor. I learned that scars don't disappear, they transform. Every mark on my skin reminded me not of my weakness, but of the night I finally fought back. Michael stayed by my side through it all, proving that family isn't defined by blood, but by those who show up when the world crumbles. When the trial began, I walked into that courtroom limping, head high, refusing to look away. Richard avoided my gaze. Mom didn't. Her eyes found me, but they weren't cold anymore. They were hollow. She had gambled me away and she had lost. I didn't testify with anger. I testified with truth. And truth was enough to bury their empire forever. Because the greatest revenge wasn't rage. It was peace. My revenge was freedom forever. Have you ever faced betrayal? Share your story in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe.